The magnetic pull, why avoidants always come back to the one who loved them right. There's a strange, irresistible gravity in relationships with avoidant partners, one that pulls them back to the very person they once kept at arm's length. Not because of weakness, not because of neediness, but because real, grounded love leaves an imprint they can't outrun, even when running is what they do best. There's a truth we don't talk about enough. People who fear closeness are often the ones most deeply moved by it. Avoidants may withdraw, they may create distance, they may convince themselves that connection is dangerous, but here's what they never expect. Someone who can love them without losing themselves. When an avoidant meets a person who understands boundaries, who isn't shaken by their emotional waves, who offers warmth without pressure, something profound happens. They feel safe. And safety is rare for someone who grew up believing independence was their only shield. They leave not because you were too much, but because the closeness felt unfamiliar, confusing, scary. But after the dust settles, after the noise quiets, they remember the peace they felt with you, the way you didn't chase, the way you didn't collapse, the way you loved without begging to be loved back. And in a world full of intensity, chaos, and conditional affection, that kind of love becomes unforgettable. The mistake many people make is believing that their value is contingent on whether the avoidant returns. But the truth is the opposite. They come back because you were valuable, because you showed a version of connection that didn't threaten their freedom or identity. It's not magic. It's not manipulation. It's emotional integrity. You were the exception to their pattern. The quiet moment in their storm. The only place where closeness didn't feel like a trap. And no matter how far they run, that memory becomes a compass pointing them back, not because you need them, but because of the person you were when they had you. The real power lies not in their return, but in whether you still want that dynamic once you've grown into someone who knows their worth. Avoidants don't return because of need. They return because emotional safety is rare. And when they finally experience it, it leaves a quiet imprint they can't forget. For people with avoidant attachment patterns, closeness often feels like a threat, not because they don't desire connection, but because they learned early on that vulnerability comes with a cost. Maybe emotional needs were dismissed. Maybe independence was rewarded. Maybe affection was inconsistent. Whatever the origin, avoidants develop a belief that relying on someone is risky. So they build a life on self-sufficiency, space, and emotional control. But something interesting happens when they meet someone who offers closeness without pressure, warmth without chaos, and presence without neediness. Suddenly, the connection doesn't resemble the experiences that taught them to be guarded. It feels different, comforting, grounded, steady. And because it feels different, it also feels unfamiliar. That unfamiliarity triggers the part of them that's used to being alone, the part that says, danger, get space, retreat. So they pull back, not because you did something wrong, but because the closeness itself activated old fears. Yet the human heart remembers what feels good, even when the mind tries to run. Emotional safety is not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, steady, almost serene. Avoidants are used to relationships that feel overwhelming or invasive, or ones where they must always be the strong one, the distant one, the one who doesn't need anything. They don't expect someone who stands confidently on their own while also offering genuine care. They don't expect someone who doesn't chase them when they withdraw, who doesn't crumble when they pull away, who doesn't take their distance as a cue to abandon their own center. When you love an avoidant in a secure, dignified way, you're not just giving affection. You're giving them an entirely new emotional experience. You're creating a space where their independence is not threatened, a space where they are not responsible for managing someone else's feelings, a space where closeness doesn't feel like an obligation but an option. This kind of space is incredibly rare for them. Even if they walk away, the imprint of that emotional environment lingers. While they are gone, the relationships they encounter often repeat the same old patterns. People who demand more than they can give, people who misunderstand their need for space, people who confuse independence with disinterest, people who turn intimacy into pressure. They fall back into familiar dynamics, and it reinforces just how unusual your presence was. The contrast becomes unavoidable. Emotional safety becomes obvious, not through memory alone, but through comparison. They realized that the way you loved them didn't shrink them. It gave them room to breathe. An avoidant is often attracted to intensity at first because it feels exciting, but over time, intensity becomes exhausting. They retreat from relationships that consume them or relationships that collapse into neediness. But the memory of a connection that allowed them to be fully themselves without being swallowed becomes a kind of emotional landmark. Even if they suppress it, it stays in their subconscious as something that felt right, even if it scared them. What pulls them back is not the desire to be saved, nor the fantasy of dependence. It's the subtle recognition that they felt more themselves with you than in the relationships that overwhelmed them or the solitude that eventually feels empty. Avoidants convince themselves they don't need anyone, but no human being is immune to the desire to feel seen, understood, and accepted. When they experience that without strings attached, something softens in them, even if they don't show it in real time. Another part of what draws them back is the emotional stability you demonstrated. When they withdrew, you didn't explode, guilt trip, or panic. Your restraint showed them that closeness with you doesn't come with dramatic consequences. This subtly rewires their idea of intimacy. It teaches them that connection can exist without the loss of control they fear. That lesson doesn't disappear just because they chose distance. In fact, distance often allows the clarity to settle in. People often think avoidance come back out of loneliness or convenience, but it's deeper than that. They return to the person who felt emotionally safe, because safety is not just rare, it's magnetic. Even those who run from love are drawn to the version of love that doesn't demand they change who they are. Avoidants may not articulate this. They may not even consciously understand it. But emotionally, they gravitate back to the one place where intimacy didn't feel like a cage. Emotional safety is powerful not because it forces someone's hand, but because it resonates at a level they can't rationalize away. It feels like home, not the chaotic kind, but the kind that lets them breathe. And when they've lived a life believing that closeness is costly, discovering a connection where closeness feels peaceful is enough to pull them back again and again to the one who loved them right. Your boundaries, not your sacrifice, are what made you unforgettable. So often people believe that to hold on to someone, especially someone avoidant, they must give more, compromise more, or sacrifice their own needs. But the truth is the opposite. Avoidants are drawn not to desperation, not to people who bend at every whim, but to those who are grounded in their own worth and who respect their own limits. Boundaries are not walls, they are signals. They communicate to an avoidant that you are self-contained, that your love is not dependent on their approval, and that your life is not revolving around their emotional tides. This demonstration of self-respect, stability, and clarity is magnetic in a way that neediness or over-accommodation simply cannot compete with. From the perspective of an avoidant, someone who lacks boundaries can be frightening in a subtle way. Without boundaries, a partner's love feels like a trap. It feels like a constant demand, a potential threat to their independence. It triggers that deeply ingrained fear of engulfment, the sense that closeness is synonymous with losing oneself. Boundaries, by contrast, signal that closeness is safe. They allow the avoidant to approach intimacy on their terms because there is a clear framework within which connection can exist without annihilation. The clarity of your limits shows them that love doesn't have to be chaotic or consuming to be meaningful. It demonstrates that emotional connection can coexist with autonomy, which is exactly what an avoidant secretly craves but often doesn't believe is possible. What makes boundaries particularly powerful is that they are consistent. They are not reactive. They do not shift based on the avoidant's emotional volatility. When someone loves in a consistent, principled way, it sends a message that is stronger than words. It communicates that you are not swayed by panic, withdrawal, or manipulation. You are steady, you are reliable, and reliability, for someone who fears unpredictability in intimacy, is a profound draw. It tells them that while they may try to escape, the connection they have with you will remain stable, grounded, and non-intrusive. In a sense, boundaries create a space where trust can grow, because trust is impossible when love is conditional or reactive. Many people misunderstand the power of boundaries and equate them with rigidity or coldness. But true boundaries are warm and compassionate. They are firm about what is acceptable, but generous in the ways they allow closeness and care. You can maintain your limits while showing love, curiosity, and support. This combination of firmness and openness is disarming for an avoidant. It shows them that emotional availability doesn't have to be suffocating and that intimacy can be mutually respectful rather than one-sided. When an avoidant sees that love does not require them to abandon themselves, they begin to recognize that your presence is rare and valuable in a way that most connections they've experienced are not. Your boundaries also serve as a mirror for them. They show an avoidant what it feels like to be with someone who is fully themselves, unapologetically human, and unwilling to compromise their integrity for the sake of approval. In this way, boundaries are not just protective, they're also magnetic. They create a paradoxical pull. The very independence that might have made them initially hesitant now becomes an invitation. It sparks curiosity, admiration, and even desire. When you are firm, confident, and clear about your own limits, it creates a dynamic in which the avoidant sees that closeness with you is a choice rather than an obligation. And when closeness is a choice, it becomes infinitely more appealing. Sacrifice, on the other hand, often erodes attraction. Over-accommodation or people-pleasing communicates a lack of self-containment. It suggests that your emotional world is contingent on their behavior, which can trigger fear rather than desire. Avoidants are not drawn to desperation. They are not drawn to someone who will bend endlessly to chase connection because that type of dynamic amplifies their fear of engulfment. Boundaries, in contrast, communicate that you are whole on your own, that your love is not dependent on compliance, and that your value is inherent rather than negotiable. This type of self-possession is rare, and rarity is inherently magnetic. Additionally, boundaries create a sense of tension and space that avoidants often crave subconsciously. They need distance to integrate emotional experiences without feeling trapped. By maintaining your limits, you provide a rhythm that respects their need for space while still allowing for connection. This push and pull dynamic is not about manipulation, it is about alignment with their natural wiring. It allows them to approach intimacy when they are ready, rather than fleeing from it because it feels overwhelming or uncontained. Over time, this rhythm fosters not just comfort, but admiration. They begin to associate you with safety, stability, and emotional integrity, all qualities that are incredibly rare and compelling. In essence, boundaries communicate confidence, stability, and self-respect. They show avoidance that you are not dependent on their validation, that your love is reliable yet non-coercive, and that connection can exist without suffocation. They create space for them to explore closeness without fear, to gradually engage without triggering old patterns of avoidance. And this is why boundaries, not sacrifice, not chasing, not compromise, make you unforgettable. You become the person they remember, not because you gave more, but because you gave the right combination of consistency, respect, and emotional presence that made them feel safe and seen in a way they rarely, if ever, have before. Their distance was about their wiring, not your worth. It is easy to internalize an avoidant partner's withdrawal as a reflection of your value, to interpret their need for space or their emotional unavailability as evidence that you weren't enough, that you failed, or that something about you caused them to retreat. But the truth is far more nuanced. Avoidant attachment patterns are not personal attacks. They are a strategy born out of fear, past experiences, and deeply ingrained coping mechanisms. They are about how that person relates to closeness, vulnerability, and dependency, not about your character, your love, or your worthiness. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it reframes the entire narrative of your experience and allows you to see their distance with clarity rather than self-doubt. Avoidants learned early on that closeness can be risky. Whether in childhood or through past relationships, they discovered that expressing need or relying on someone else could result in disappointment, rejection, or a loss of autonomy. Over time, the brain internalizes this lesson. Intimacy triggers discomfort, and distance becomes a protective measure. When an avoidant partner withdraws, it is often a reflex, a deeply conditioned response rather than a calculated statement about you. Their fear of being overwhelmed, engulfed, or trapped overrides their ability to act purely on desire or affection. This is not to excuse hurtful behavior, but to understand it as a pattern that originates within them, not as a verdict on your value. From their perspective, maintaining distance is about safety. They may crave connection and love, but the moment closeness threatens to make them feel vulnerable, they instinctively recoil. It is not about whether you are loving enough, attractive enough, or supportive enough. It is about their internal discomfort with intimacy. They may intellectually know that you are trustworthy, but emotionally, their nervous system reacts with alarm. This reaction has little to do with you personally. You could be the kindest, most patient, and most emotionally mature partner they have ever had, and still, their avoidance reflex can dominate their behavior. Recognizing this helps to depersonalize their actions and prevents unnecessary self-blame. Avoidants often struggle to reconcile their desire for connection with their fear of losing control. They want closeness, but they are terrified of being smothered, of being vulnerable, of feeling exposed. This creates a push-pull dynamic. They come near when they feel safe, and they pull away when the intimacy feels too intense or unfamiliar. For someone on the outside, this can feel confusing and even painful, leading to thoughts like, if only I were more loving, they wouldn't run, or I must have done something wrong to push them away. But in reality, the distance is not a punishment or a judgment. It is a manifestation of their internal struggle. It is their wiring, their way of managing the discomfort that intimacy triggers, not a reflection of your worth or desirability. It's also important to recognize that avoidance is often unconscious. Many avoidants do not even fully understand why they pull back. They simply react. They may tell themselves that they need space, that they are not ready, or that the relationship is too much without connecting these statements to the underlying patterns formed in childhood or previous experiences. From their perspective, they are solving a problem, protecting themselves rather than judging you. Their behavior is about self-preservation, not a statement about your inadequacy. This understanding can transform your perspective, helping you to see that their distance is a pattern to observe rather than a verdict to internalize. Another factor is the complexity of emotional availability. Avoidants often struggle with the intensity of their own feelings, and the feelings of others can feel overwhelming. Even if they deeply care about you, the experience of emotional closeness can feel destabilizing. Their withdrawal is a coping mechanism, a way to regulate themselves when their internal system feels threatened. It is not a message that you are unworthy of love. On the contrary, if they ever return, it is often because they have processed their discomfort enough to recognize that the connection with you is safe and sustaining. The key point is that their absence or distance does not diminish your value. It simply reflects where they are on their own emotional journey. Understanding this distinction also shifts the way you approach the relationship. When you internalize their distance as a personal failure, it creates anxiety, overcompensation, and sometimes codependency. You may try harder to fix them or to force closeness, which often backfires. But when you recognize that their distance is about their wiring, you can maintain perspective, compassion, and boundaries without sacrificing your self-respect. You stop questioning your worth for every withdrawal and start seeing the patterns for what they are. Reflections of their internal mechanisms, not a mirror of your deficiencies. Even when their behavior causes pain, it can be helpful to separate the person from the pattern. You can acknowledge that their avoidance affects you, that it is frustrating or heartbreaking without making it a reflection of your inadequacy. Their fear of intimacy is theirs to manage, just as your self-worth is yours to maintain. In fact, avoiding self-blame reinforces your presence as someone who loves wisely, not desperately. This clarity often makes the person even more aware of the rare, steady love you offer, a love that is independent of their reactions and rooted in self-respect. Ultimately, their distance is a story about them, not you. It is about the way their mind and heart navigate closeness, vulnerability, and autonomy. Understanding this frees you from unnecessary guilt and helps you approach the relationship with greater clarity and dignity. Their withdrawal may hurt, it may frustrate, it may confuse, but it does not diminish your worth. Recognizing that their patterns are not a judgment on you allows you to maintain confidence, preserve your boundaries, and honor the person you are, while also seeing the rare value that your grounded, steady love represents in their life. Real love leaves an imprint avoidance can't outrun. It is not always loud or flashy, and it rarely comes with fanfare or immediate recognition. But when someone experiences love that is patient, consistent, and grounded, it forms a memory in their emotional landscape that lingers long after they have walked away. Avoidants in particular are drawn to this kind of love, even if they cannot articulate why, even if they try to push it aside, and even if they resist the very closeness it represents. For them, love is often accompanied by tension. They desire it but fear it. They approach it but retreat from it. When they meet someone who demonstrates a love that does not suffocate or demand, that love imprints on their memory because it represents something radically different from what they have experienced before. Avoidants are accustomed to relationships that are chaotic, conditional, or demanding. They have often learned that intimacy comes with strings attached, that closeness is dangerous, and that emotional dependency leads to vulnerability that is unsafe. In contrast, real love, as demonstrated by someone who loves wisely and securely, is stable and respectful. It offers a combination of warmth, understanding, and consistency that is rare and almost unfamiliar to them. It is not designed to manipulate or control, but to support and honor the person in front of it. This type of love does not erode their autonomy. Instead, it complements it. It does not pressure them to be someone they are not. Instead, it accepts who they are while gently encouraging growth. This rare combination of qualities is what creates an indelible impression on an avoidant psyche. The imprint left by real love is subtle but powerful. It manifests as a memory of calmness during chaos, stability during unpredictability, and patience during their moments of withdrawal. Avoidants may not consciously acknowledge this imprint immediately. They may focus on the discomfort of closeness, the fear of vulnerability, or the instinct to run. Yet deep down, they remember the way it felt to be with someone who did not demand them to change, who did not react dramatically to their distance, who offered reassurance without pressure. This memory becomes a reference point, a benchmark against which all future relationships are unconsciously measured. No other connection quite matches it because it combines presence, respect, and freedom in a way that is extraordinarily rare. Another element of the imprint is the demonstration of emotional integrity. When an avoidant experiences love that is consistent and principled, it teaches them that intimacy does not have to be volatile. They observe that love can exist without panic, without manipulation, and without neediness. They see that it is possible to be deeply connected to someone without being engulfed or controlled. This understanding, once internalized, is difficult to forget because it challenges the patterns that have dominated their relationships for years. It shows them an alternative way of relating, one that feels safe yet profound, freeing yet tethered. The memory of this approach sticks precisely because it contrasts so sharply with what they have learned to expect from others. Avoidants are often drawn back to this imprint unconsciously. They may not articulate it as nostalgia or desire, but their behavior often betrays the pull of that memory. Even if they leave to seek space, independence, or other connections, the mental and emotional imprint of a love that was steady and safe continues to influence them. They carry it as a quiet reminder of what genuine connection can feel like. The imprint is not about dependency, it is about recognition of something extraordinary. It is the realization that they have felt closeness that did not compromise their autonomy, affection that did not suffocate them, and acceptance that did not demand change. These experiences are rare and profoundly impactful for someone whose attachment style has historically made them cautious and defensive. The imprint also works as a subtle teacher. Avoidants often do not have the tools to express what they felt or to sustain it on their own. But the memory lingers. It teaches them that vulnerability can coexist with independence, that intimacy can exist without fear, and that love can be stable, patient, and validating. Over time, as they encounter relationships that are inconsistent or superficial, they unconsciously compare them to the standard set by that original experience of genuine love. They recognize the absence of steadiness, the absence of patience, and the absence of respect for boundaries, which makes the memory of that love even more profound. It becomes a reference point, quietly guiding their understanding of what healthy connection can and should feel like. Avoidants may attempt to outrun this imprint through logic, distraction, or avoidance itself. They may convince themselves that the connection was not meaningful, that the love was unusual, or that they are incapable of experiencing it again. Yet the imprint remains, embedded in their emotional memory, influencing their choices, reactions, and even their long-term desires. It operates on a level beneath conscious thought, shaping their emotional landscape in ways that are persistent and enduring. Even after time passes, the subtle pull of that love can resurface, drawing them back toward the person who demonstrated it with integrity, patience, and respect. Finally, the imprint of real love is lasting because it represents authenticity. Avoidants are naturally attuned to detect pretense, manipulation, or neediness. When they encounter someone who loves with authenticity, someone whose care, patience, and respect are consistent, deliberate, and unconditional, it leaves a mark that cannot be erased. It is not simply the feeling of being loved. It is the experience of being truly seen, understood, and accepted in a way that resonates deeply with their own longing for connection. This type of love imprints itself in a way that is unforgettable, leaving a subtle yet undeniable pull that can draw avoidance back, even after distance, even after time, and even after fear has led them to run. The true power is yours. You get to decide whether to reopen the door. One of the most overlooked truths in relationships with avoidance is that while they may come back, their return is not the ultimate measure of success or validation. The magnetism they feel towards someone who loved them well does not automatically obligate you to accept them back or to re-enter a dynamic that may have caused pain or imbalance. Your agency in these situations is profound, yet often underestimated. The moment someone who once left you returns, it becomes less about their actions and more about your response. You have the ability to set the terms, protect your emotional boundaries, and determine whether this relationship aligns with your growth, self-respect, and long-term well-being. For many people, the instinct upon an avoidance return is to feel flattered, to interpret it as a signal of their own value, or to equate it with love won or proof of importance. While it can feel validating to see someone come back, it is critical to recognize that their return is rooted in their own needs and emotional processes, not as a reflection of your worth. This is where your power comes into play. The choice is yours to weigh your own emotional health against their presence, to decide whether rekindling the relationship aligns with the life you want to build. Reopening the door is not an automatic reward or an obligatory step. It is a conscious, intentional decision that requires clarity, honesty, and self-awareness. This power also means that you are the one who controls the narrative. Avoidants often operate from patterns, not intentionality. They may have left for reasons that had little to do with your value, and their return may be motivated by loneliness, reflection, or a desire for familiarity. Recognizing this shifts the dynamic from reactive to proactive. You are not at the mercy of their actions or their emotional pull. Instead, you are the one who evaluates the context, determines the boundaries, and decides whether the relationship is worth reinvesting in. This perspective transforms what could be a moment of vulnerability into a moment of empowerment, because it places you firmly in the driver's seat of your emotional life. Another layer of this power is the ability to redefine the relationship on your own terms. You are not compelled to revert to old patterns that previously allowed imbalance, compromise, or emotional exhaustion. You have the right to demand clarity, respect, and consistency, and to enforce boundaries that protect your well-being. This could mean setting limits on communication, insisting on transparency about intentions, or establishing a slower pace to rebuild trust. By defining the terms, you create a structure that is fair, sustainable, and reflective of your self-respect. The avoidance return does not automatically reset the relationship. It is your opportunity to design a dynamic that is healthier, more equitable, and aligned with your growth. The decision to welcome someone back also involves deep self-reflection. You must evaluate your own readiness, emotional capacity, and willingness to engage with the person without compromising your dignity or needs. Returning to someone who previously caused emotional disruption requires clarity about what has changed, both in them and in you. It is not about forgiveness alone, but about assessing whether the relationship can now function in a balanced way. This process of introspection ensures that your choice is rooted in conscious intent rather than impulse, nostalgia, or the gravitational pull of old feelings. Exercising this level of awareness is a demonstration of the ultimate power in relationships, choosing yourself first, regardless of external pressures. Your power also lies in the recognition that acceptance is conditional on growth, both theirs and yours. Avoidants may come back after time apart, but that return is not a guarantee of transformation. They may still carry patterns of withdrawal, fear of intimacy, or emotional inconsistency. Your decision to engage again should not be based on the hope of change alone, but on observable behavior and commitment to healthier patterns. By evaluating the relationship with this lens, you assert control over your emotional environment. You are not simply reopening a door because it is available. You are deciding whether opening it is beneficial, constructive, and aligned with your vision for a fulfilling partnership. In addition, the power to choose allows you to set an example of self-respect and emotional intelligence. By exercising discernment, you communicate that your love is not indiscriminate or conditional on someone else's behavior. You signal that respect, consistency, and integrity are non-negotiable values in your relationships. This not only reinforces your boundaries, but also encourages the avoidant to engage with you from a place of accountability rather than entitlement. When they see that your love is principled and not dependent on chasing or accommodating their avoidance, it creates a dynamic of mutual respect rather than imbalance. Perhaps most importantly, recognizing your power prevents the romanticization of their return. Avoidance can carry an aura of intrigue or nostalgia that tempts people into forgetting past challenges or compromises. But the true measure of power is the ability to step back, evaluate objectively, and decide whether the relationship serves your growth and happiness. You are not diminished by saying no. You are strengthened by making choices that honor your self-worth and maintain your emotional integrity. Ultimately, your power is the ability to reclaim ownership of your heart. While their return may evoke old feelings, nostalgia, or hope, you are the one who determines whether to respond, how to respond, and under what conditions. The gravity of their reappearance does not dictate your path. Your self-respect, discernment, and clarity do. Choosing to reopen the door or choosing not to is a declaration that your love, your time, and your emotional energy are yours to protect, and that no one's return can compel you to compromise your standards or your value. In the end, the story of avoidance returning is not about chasing someone who left, nor is it about proving your worth. It is about understanding the quiet power of steady, respectful love, the kind of love that leaves an imprint, creates safety, and honors both hearts without sacrificing your own. It is about recognizing that your value is inherent, that your boundaries are magnetic, and that the true strength lies not in whether they come back, but in the clarity and self-respect you carry when they do. Remember, love is never diminished by distance, fear, or avoidance. It is amplified by the integrity, patience, and courage with which you give it. Thank you for allowing me to share this insight with you today. I hope it reminds you of your worth, the power of emotional clarity, and the beauty of loving without losing yourself in the process. May you always remember that the right kind of love doesn't just arrive, it resonates, and it leaves a lasting impact that no fear or avoidance can erase. Thank you, stay strong, and may your relationships be guided by respect, courage, and genuine connection.